What's going on, guys? Aaron from Top Tier Gaming here, and today I'm coming at you with my Mendenhall Regional Marincess deck profile. It's the deck I took to the most recent regional I went to, and once again, I did not manage to get another top 8, so it looks like we're ending the Photon Hypernova Regional with only 2 of this, Chaos Angel mat that I'm doing the profile on, one from the Houston Regional and one from the Shreveport Regional, which we actually got with Marincess, so I'm using the Marincess mat for this profile, but no, we did not win another one. I'm going to put my rounds on the screen and talk about them a little bit before I get into the profile. It was definitely a very strange event for me. Another kind of weird one similar to the Fort Worth one. I definitely did not play as optimally as I usually expect myself to. I definitely made a couple of pretty egregious misplays that cost me games or got me a draw where I probably shouldn't have gotten a draw. And yeah, it was just, it was a pretty wild day. But yeah, so mostly going over the profile though, it's going to be talking about the list and the choices I made, because despite some of my own errors, I actually think this list is mostly an improvement from my top 8 Shreveport Regional profile. Yeah, there's a lot of things I liked that I changed from my last list, and I would still continue to play them. However, yeah, some of my misplays really cost me, so I really like the list. I'm going to explain maybe things that I didn't like and things maybe you can take from this, because there's just as much to learn from a topping list sometimes as a list that you maybe didn't top with, because it still tells a story, and the cards, they still functioned well overall. So with all that out of the way, let's hop into this Marincess deck profile. Alright, so starting with the Marincess engine, it's pretty similar to what I played at Shreveport, but a little different. So it's a little different from my top 8 deck profile. We are, of course, still on 3 Blue Tang, as she is the best Marincess starter. One of the best Cyber starters in the game, of course, outside of Circular, because Circular is beyond bonkers. But yeah, we're maximizing 3 Blue Tang. She is the reason to play the deck, kind of. Blue Tang's just a great card. 3 Spring Girl, still one of the best Marincess monsters as well, because she's the only true, extender in the deck, and I said that in my Shreveport profile as well. She's the only thing that can extend past interruptions on your normal summon, and that's what makes Spring Girl so good. You have to maximize her for this reason. She's 100% mandatory to play at 3, in my opinion. And then I still really love playing 3 Marincess Pascalis. There's a couple of reasons for this. I know a lot of people are not on 3 Pascalis, but it's hard for me to decide to play a list without 3 of her for so many reasons, and I'll kind of explain that because it has been a while since my top 8 profile. The reason I like 3 Pascalis is, 1, going first, she's just an additional extender, so that's nice. It makes your end board better sometimes, especially through low impacts, which you're already kind of fine against, but it's even better when you have Pascalis. 2, while she's just an extender, she's also level 4, which I love to go Bahamut Shark into Totally Awesome before Summon 5. And running Pascalis and seeing Pascalis opens the door for a lot of 3-card combos that you can have in a myriad of ways that allow you to get there, and that happens very often, and seeing Pascalis is huge for that reason. Another reason is that her Grave effect is arguably the best Marincess Grave effect, so it's really nice to have a copy of her in Graveyard. But most importantly, above all other reasons, is going second, she is imperative to me. Spring Girl, the way she extends is super important for the deck, and Pascalis is kind of the same way, right? If you're not starting Pascalis, your deck suddenly loses to Book of Moon, it loses to Mirror Jade, it loses to Lillipop, it loses to Arise Heart Banish. Without Pascalis, your deck is very normal summon weak, which has always been a problem for Marincess. So Pascalis, particularly going second, is absolutely phenomenal to be able to play into boards like that and not instantly lose. And that's one of the reasons I adore 3 Pascalis. I can't imagine playing without her. Maybe 2 is fine. Obviously, the big downside is you don't want to see multiples of her in your opening hand. But I think she's a fantastic card and something I like playing at 3. 1, because of Bahamut Shark and achieving level 4. And going second, I find her super important. 3, Marincess Seahorse. I did sort of entertain the idea of playing 2 of her, because I did cut a Marincess monster that I'll show later. But I decided to cut that monster for the 3rd Seahorse rather than play the monster in question here. And yeah, 3 Seahorse is fine. She's a starter, the other one isn't. And yeah, Seahorse was really solid as an extender. 1, Basilalima. I still decided to play this card, and she was honestly really great. I love this card. I think she's one of the better Marincess monsters, because she provides something in Graveyard none of the other ones do, which is protection from things. This card was great against Flashing Fire in my Runic matchups. This card was, of course, great against Sword Soul if you end up playing it. And very good versus Lillipop. This card comes up a lot, and yeah, I would always continue playing this card. Also, she's level 4, which is nice. And then I played a Mandarin. I was playing No Sleepy Maiden, is the card I was talking about earlier this event. deciding to play the Mandarin, which is something I said I would do in my last top 8 profile. And there was one game where I missed Sleepy Maiden, but overall it's only good, or she's only really good when you open exactly Blue Tang and you can go for 1-card Blue Tang combo. But Mandarin is very good going second and provides actual extending power from the graveyard as like an additional body from not like a recycled resource, but she's just like a free special summon, which is very nice, especially going into certain Zelantis lines for game. And I really wanted to play Mandarin, and she was super solid. This is a change I think overall I liked from my top 8 list. I still think Sleepy Maiden is good, and potentially you could take out a Seahorse for her, but then again, you're taking out a 1-card starter for, by itself, what is essentially a brick, but it's a very good engine piece, so that's a decision you can make. I think I preferred this Marincess lineup to my top 8 profile, especially because Mandarin is very, very good. 2 Silent Sea Nettle for some additional engine pieces and extenders. I really like this card. Again, I'm going for more of a Bahamut Shark route where I really like the level 4 parts of Marincess. Another reason is because this deck really struggles against D-Shifter, which a lot of Kashtira lists are playing. And an out to D-Shifter is essentially to make Kragan, which is another addition I made from my last list. And Nettle is just so good. I love playing with this card, and I mentioned that a lot in my last deck profile. So I'm not going to talk about him too much, but I think this card is fantastic in the deck, and it's a card I really enjoy playing with. For the Marincess spells and traps, I'm still on the 1 Battle Lotion, the 2 Marincess Dive, which is standard, and the 1 Wave. Of course, 1 Wave is arguably standard. Of course, there are some Marincess players that like maining more copies. Personally, I don't like the idea. I think even when I'm playing one of this, when I see it going second, it is horrendous. It's just not a good card to draw going second at all. And it's arguably not even that good to draw going first. Now, when you do set up it, like running more does increase your ceiling because having multiple wave is great. But personally, I prefer one of this. You can adjust the build to play more if you really like wave. I've seen a list with 2, which I think is fine. Personally, I think 1 is the best, but yeah, you can make your own decision there. 2, Signet Mining. I really just dislike this card, and that's why I'm playing it at 2. I think with Droll being more popular in the format as well, playing this at 3 was something I didn't want to do. And I wish I could cut it all together because it really stinks to get Ash. Just like the one way a low impact really hurts you. It feels bad as a starter. It almost always gets sided out going second because you like trade 2 cards into a board. It's not great. But you are forced to play this card because you only have exactly 3 copies of Spring Girl in your deck, and sometimes there's just no way to extend without her if there's an interrupt on your normal summon. So you do have to play the Signet Mining, and you know, worst case scenario is just 2 more copies of Blue Tang. So yeah, definitely 2 Signet. 2 Pot of Desires. One of my favorite things about playing Marincess is you get to play this card. This card's insane, although it did technically like lose me a match. Talking about some weird things that happened at the event. I opened this, Pascalis, like 2 flex spots and a nib. So like 3 flex spots, and I was like, okay, I could play with just the Pascalis, but my end board's not gonna be amazing. I'm gonna do Desires early because I don't really care what gets banished too much. Like, yeah, Wave stinks to get banished, the field spell stinks to get banished, but overall it's fine. And Pot of Desires didn't banish anything bad, but I was looking at my hand with Nib and like a couple of other okay cards, and then Pot of Desires drew 2 more Nibiru, which was just horrendous. So I had like 3 Nib in hand and like just Pascalis. It was really weird, but every other time I activated Desires that day, this card's insane. It's just a free +1. It's definitely a card I love playing in Marincess. The last engine card, so to speak, or the card I was playing as an engine card was actually Monster Reborn. I only decided to play this deck when Nibiru's coming back into the format. I realized, like, there was a month span where I could have been playing this deck when Nibiru was really under the radar before the 250th YCS, and I just wasn't. And then, of course, Nibiru kind of comes back into the format, and I want to play Marincess. It's funny how that works. Gamma is also something that was on my radar as a card that was trending upward, so Monster Reborn is both an out to Gamma and Nibiru, so it's a card I really don't mind playing. It's not like the most amazing card, but it's definitely not bad, and it won me like 1 game for sure, and it was actually used to Monster Reborn my opponent's Red Resonator 1 game, and that sort of led into a draw because it was my only way to not lose that match was to Monster Reborn his Red Resonator, so that was pretty hilarious. But yeah, there is Monster Reborn. For the flex spots and the defensive cards, this I believe is the exact same as my top 8 list, so I will go through these relatively quickly. Triple Tactics Talent is one of the best flex spots in Marincess in my opinion, simply because when you get Nibiru or Gamma, you do need a card to kind of like play through those cards or get some value for being punished. in a sense, by those really powerful cards that hurt Marincess, so Tactics is really good at that. It's also a pretty strong go second tool, especially because, with the addition of Zelantis way back in Darkwing Blast, you can now, link your opponent's monsters into something, even if you're locked into water. 3, Book of Eclipse. This card is okay. It was between this or Book of Moon. Book of Moon was something I was enjoying more, but Marincess does sometimes struggle going second, so I went for something a little more impactful. Some Kashtira lists were on, Lance and Saravis, so this plays around Saravis at least. Yeah, it was okay. It wasn't bad. I don't know if Book of Moon would have been better either. It was just an okay. The books were just okay. 3, Ash Blossom, of course, getting into the hand traps. We're, of course, going to play 3 Ash. 3, Infinite Impermanence. These were all solid. And then Nibiru, I played 3 of, and it was either the best or the worst card in my deck at the event. Obviously, when I drew 3 of it, it was pretty tough. I had a couple of hands where I just drew multiples of it throughout the day. I think 4 different games, I drew 2 to 3 Nibiru. And yeah, he was just being really awkward. But also, there were 2 games where I won solely because of Nibiru. So yeah, he was both the best and worst card in my deck that day. He won me my Dark World match game 3. And yeah, I honestly, I think I could have played this card better throughout the event too. I know one of my biggest misplays was against Virtual World, where I tried to force this card when I really didn't have to, and it kind of lost me the game. But yeah, Nib was great. You obviously, I think you need to play it in this deck because you lose to Nibiru, and one of the counters to getting nibbed is to have a nib of your own. So yeah, I really like Nibiru. But you could also main deck Gozen Match. It's something I haven't tested with too much, but it's a card that really does tend to play around getting blown out by hand traps like Nibiru or Gamma going first. So I think Gozen Match is a potentially good card to main deck as well. Alright, on to the extra deck, which I'll go through fairly quick because Marincess extra decks are not only pretty standard, but this did not change any except for 2 cards from my other list. So going through it, we are playing 2 Blue Slug. Sometimes I wish I could play 3, but there's really just no space at all. 2 Sea Angel. This card is, how you get your spells. She's insane. You want to play at least 2 of each of them in my opinion. Mostly for Kashtira. Otherwise, you could argue for 1 Sea Angel. I've done it in the past. 2 Coral Anemone. This card is also a card I wish you could play at 3 sometimes. She's your main link 2. You funnel into her with everything. 1 Coral Triangle, one of the most broken cards in the deck because, it searches your wave, which is broken. And then Soul Charge, which is additionally broken. 1 Marbled Rock, you definitely need to play her. She often, when you're in the grind game, will reset your engine as well, which is pretty big. And also, she's just a fantastic card. And then you have 1 Argonaut and 1 Great Bubble Reef. These are also your standard link 4s, and I believe it is 10 Marincess links. Yes, and that's the bulk of your Marincess engine from the extra deck. Then we have 1 Zelantis, which I wish I could play 2 of this like I did in my top 8 list. However, I took 1 out for a Stealth Kragan because the D-Shifter thing that I mentioned earlier, it's one of the best outs to D-Shifter, and Kragan put in a lot of work, so overall I'm not upset that I didn't play 2 Zelantis, but I wish I could because he's one of the most insane cards about this deck. 1 Splash Mage. So this was the other change besides the Kragan I added, was I took out Area for Splash Mage. Area didn't come up but once at Shreveport, and it hadn't been coming up a lot in testing, so I was okay, Splash Mage has lines for it. But overall, I don't like the Splash Mage lines for this deck either, and I never went Splash Mage all day. It just never came up. It can make your really bad starters turn into link 4s, but oftentimes I would just rather make Coral Anemone and get Wave, so I just never went for the line. This arguably could come out, but it's also your out to Ibly, so I think this just needs to be Splash Mage or Area, which is unfortunate because I don't really make those, but yeah, there is the Splash Mage. Then for rank 4s, we have the Bahamut Shark and the Totally Awesome, which I went for all the time. This package is insane to me. Yeah, this card, this package is always good and pretty solid for me overall. And then Stealth Kragan, which was actually amazing at the event. Really glad I chose to play it over the second Zelantis. He came up so many times, whether to just break a board and push for game, or just to set up on my end board, and obviously him and Gozen Match are crazy, and we do side the Gozen Match even though we do not main deck it. So yeah, Stealth Kragan, very good card. And then on to the side deck, which I think was just okay. I didn't have a lot of time. I only had 2 days to essentially prepare this deck for the event. Because I went to 3 events in a row, I was suffering from pretty big event fatigue and didn't have enough time to prepare any deck perfectly. So it's a side deck, and I don't think it's bad, but it's not perfected for sure. 3 Ghost Bell, mostly for Math Mech, but it also crosses over pretty well into the branded matchup if that's to come up. But it's mostly for Math Mech, and Math Mech was dominating at the top tables. It's becoming very apparent that the deck is a big threat, which I've put it in my tier list before, and people were like, no, the deck's not that good, but it really does seem like the deck's that good. Math Mech is insane, and I really want this for the Math Mech matchup. And then 2 Gamma Seal. I played 2 of this. 1, it's amazing with Zelantis. It has a lot of funny lines where you get to take your Gamma Seal back. But 2, it's always a card that's going to do something, and it can break boards kind of even if I'm locked into waters early and I need to get rid of a threat later. So yeah, Gamma Seal is like okay. It was fine. 3 Dark Ruler No More, which was essentially, it was between 2 Dark Ruler and 3 Gamma Seal, or vice versa. I went with more Dark Ruler because there's so many cards like I wanted this card for, like Naturia Runic if they set up Beast. This card's really nice, where, I mean, Gamma Seal is too, but this card's also very good versus Sprite boards, which are a threat for Marincess, because there's just no way you beat a Sprite board with Marincess Engine. Like just a little pop and a double cross probably beats everything you have, right? So Dark Ruler is really good for that matchup. For back row hate, I did play a Harpy's Feather Duster and then 3 Cosmic Cyclone. This deck does struggle a little bit with back row, and while I wasn't expecting too much of it, I was testing like a couple days before the event, and I was playing against so many Labyrinth decks randomly. Like I hadn't played against many all format, and then like for this past week, there were so many people on Labyrinth on DB, and I was like, wow, I just want to add another back row card. So I actually added Feather Duster back in. I was always playing 3 Cosmic because it's really good into Runic as well. But yeah, this package is pretty good. I didn't really play any back row matchups, but in case I did, it would have been solid. And of course, 3 Goes in Match, which is historically just one of the best go first cards in this deck because of Stealth Kraken and the fact that you're all water, and then if you happen to pop off the turn after you flip this, you can't get Nibiru, which is, again, really strong. So yeah, that is it for the Marincess deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. Unfortunately, wasn't able to get a second top this format with Marincess, but again, that's kind of my own fault. I really did like the build. If I was to change anything, like maybe change Splash Mage back for area, maybe try to fit Sleepy Maiden back in, or maybe even try to main the Goes in matches. I think that's the biggest potential, because it is really nice if you do get blown out to have Goes in Match as a backup, whether seeing off Talent's draw or just opening it, even if you get nibbed. Your nib usually has big attack but small defense, so they have the option to keep you locked under light, or to let the nib token just stay there and be gigantic, right? So, yep, that is going to be it for this deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave your comments down below on what you thought of the list, how you're playing Marincess. For anyone wanting to know what I think of Marincess going forward, for the rest of this format, I think Marincess is very solid. It's still a very strong engine. Going into Cyberstorm Access, I think it still has a lot of potential because it can play just a good amount of hand traps, which is solid, and its engine is fine. So we'll see how it goes in the next format. All that being said, this has been Aaron from Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.